Hi, everyone. This is Matt Mangriotis with Cambium Networks. We're here today to talk about all things CBRS. We'll start in just a couple seconds. We'll let some more people get going, get on the bridge. It is 1:01 Central Time. And this is really a session for whoever joins to ask questions about CBRS, anything and everything. We have several experts with us today. Most of the folks within Cambium that work on CBRS are here and can help answer questions. I have, as you may note in the video, we have Lucia, who is also on this morning's webinar, and I have Evan, who's our main Tier 3 level support guy for CBRS, all things CBRS expert. He's the guy that fields the customer call. And then we also have Dave Geithner listening in, who's another system architect in charge of all things CBRS as well. And we have all of us here to answer your questions. So I think with that, I'll open it up, and I don't see any questions yet typed into the question box, but that's the place to get started. If you do want to talk, feel free to raise your hand. I think there's an ability to raise your hand on there, and you could do that, and I'll unmute you, and we can have a chat if that's better for you. Please let me know if there are any questions, and we are here to share things as necessary as well. So if you need, specific questions about the device, about the template, anything you want, that's stuff we can get into. So I see a couple of questions coming in, a couple of things that are being posted. First one, what kind of speeds can I expect with the Cambium CBRS product at a distance of 5 miles or less? So speeds and feeds we can talk to. That's a pretty simple one. It's the same as what it was under Part 90, except now you're allowed a little bit higher power. So your ability to do higher modulations at further distances is increased. So in let's call it a 20 megahertz channel to a single subscriber, you can reach speeds of about 120 megs, and that's aggregated uplink and downlink, and that's fully configurable uplink and downlink. So if you want heavy downlink, you set it as such, and you can do heavy downlink. If you want more uplink for like a video surveillance application, what have you, you can do that as well. In a 40 meg channel, you can just about double that, so over 250 megs of throughput to a single subscriber. Now that's the subscriber throughput or subscriber bandwidth. If you want to talk about the aggregate capacity at the base station or sector, that becomes much larger because of the ability that we have with the CN Medusa product in 450M. That we can do, it's multi-user MIMO product. It's 8x8, which means we can talk it to up to 4 subscribers simultaneously and achieve things on the order of, up to theoretically 750 megabits per second. In reality, what we see in the field is somewhere on the order of 300, 400 megs capacity at the sector level, and that's spread across as many subscribers as you care to connect, up to 240 subscribers per sector. So those are kinds of speeds and feeds, I would say, and I hope that answers the question. If you want some more clarity or want to discuss that any further, please keep typing. I think, so someone asked a question about when do we expect the FCC to provide a call sign? And I assume that you're asking specifically about the PAL. So you have a call sign assigned to you by the Part 90 rules. And that's the same, I believe, the same call sign that you'll be using with the PAL. But I think the real question you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when can we use PALs, or when can we start engaging in actually using those PALs that we've won? That question is a little bit different depending on which SAS you're using, but all of them are kind of tracking to the same calendar. And I don't know, Lucia, do you want to take that one? I think we're all kind of familiar with the major milestones that are coming with PALs, but if you,
yes.
I know you're very familiar with that, so if you would like to answer
absolutely,
that one, I'd be happy
absolutely.
To let you.
So the first step is to actually assign specific frequencies to the PAL channels that you want. So you want some licenses, you know how many channels you have in which county, but the thing that's still missing is which actual frequencies can you use in that county. This is going to be the first phase before any feature is supported by the SAS vendors. This assignment has to happen first. The process is with the operators first are going to input their recommendations, their requests. So you will be asked which channel would you like. And once all the operators put their requests in, then an algorithm runs and it tries to accommodate everybody's request if it's possible. If it's not possible, then the algorithm is going to try the best to accommodate the most requests. After that's done, then the channel assignment is going to be published, and there is going to be a period after that where operators will be allowed to swap channels if they want to. After that, then the assignment is frozen. So at that point, you'll know for sure which channels you have. And the time frame that we hear from the SASs is about the end of December for this. So November through December is going to be the time for the whole process to happen. After that, that's when the SASs will actually support the PAL, meaning they are going to protect the PALs. Each SAS vendor may be a little different. Some are talking about supporting all of them in one shot the same day. Other SASs are thinking more about doing some counties someday and then move on to other counties and other counties. You will get the schedule for your county from your SAS, so you'll know exactly when things will happen. Another thing to consider is the SASs use different strategies for protecting the devices. Some SASs require you to go into the SAS portal and actually indicate which device you want to protect in each channel, and other SASs do not require you to do that. So that's also additional information you're going to need from your SAS to make sure you do that ahead of time. Otherwise, even if the SAS enables the feature, but you haven't done that step, then your devices are not protected yet. So again, more communication is going to come from the SASs to understand the different behavior. But what we hear is that by February 1st, all the SASs are going to support fully the PALs everywhere in the country.
Thank you for that. I hope that answers that question. If not, then again, please ask again. Question about stability. So yes, there's been a couple of hiccups. We've only recently brought CommScope on, but with both Google and Federated, we've had a couple of different hiccups with outages, interruptions of service, some various things with DPA events occurring that maybe shouldn't have, and things like that. And so, as we all know, this is brand new to everyone. And we're doing the best we can in terms of trying to make it as robust a system as possible. And again, constant improvements are happening, and I hope you guys are seeing that as you get more familiar with using the system and the upgrades to CN Maestro and radio software, that as we progress, we're getting more stable and more able to handle some of these reliability issues. From an overall robustness and outage protection, the SASs each individually are doing things every day to make their system more robust, and so that is happening. There are various backup generators being put in place for the sensor network, in addition to cloud resources being reallocated or moved around to ensure that this does not occur. And every time there is an outage or an occurrence, we're trying to be as transparent as possible with communications with our customer base to acknowledge, yes, we had an issue. Yes, they had an issue. Yes, we know what it was. Here's the root cause. Here's why it won't happen again. And hopefully we're doing a fairly good job of that. I think we're doing more on that front than we've ever done with anything before. Of course, this is our first time doing a truly cloud hosted service that's essential and mission critical for your networks. So we're learning as we go, but I think things have largely become very stable compared to where they were when we first started. And I think we're excited to kind of keep that momentum going. So there are several things ongoing, several things already in place to prevent outages and keep that from happening again. So I hope again that I answered that question enough. If not, then please keep typing new questions. I see another question about and I'm trying to go in order so we're all kind of maintaining track with the questions that are coming in. There's a question specifically about, hey, we're based in one location in the US, but we have a project out somewhere else. How do we find out what spectrum might be available in that area? Once you sign up and start using the service, you do then have access to the various SAS portal, whichever SAS you choose to use. and you can log into that portal and perform there's a lot of different maps that are available in all the SAS portals. You can check out that area to kind of see what spectrum depth might be available. You can perform a spectrum inquiry. You can also put things into the spreadsheet tool to kind of see what would be allocated to you if you were going to deploy there. So there's lots of different ways to find out what spectrum might be available in the area that you're concerned about. I don't know if anyone else, Evan, Lucia, Mike, or Dave want to follow up on that, but there's a lot of different ways to find out what spectrum might be available for a given product in a given area.
I think you nailed it. This is Dave. I think you nailed it with really the best real-time tool available to you is logging into the various different SAS admin portals, which you get access to. And it's really pretty simple. Point and click in some of them to put thumbtacks down on a map, and it'll within seconds give you a result of what spectrum is available there for both the category A, category B, things like that. So I think you nailed it. I did, and maybe we can answer other questions and then come back to this, but I did want to maybe elaborate a little bit more on some things that we might want to provide our users with the hardening and resiliency and redundancy aspects that have transpired over the last month or so, and what's coming even in the next couple of months, to make people aware of some things that we might recommend, how important it might be to stay up to date with software features as they roll out with CBRS specifically, because it'll add some things that will help improve stability, resiliency, keeping in service and things of that nature. So we can either continue with the list and then come back to that, or we can jump onto that right now if you like.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. And I'll look to tag team a little bit here with Lucia on this in that regard. So a couple of things that are probably worth noting, and some of it's just kind of echoing what Matt, what you just kind of said here. But from a Cambium perspective, I think for those of you that are already using our CBRS services, you're aware that everything kind of links together. You have the radio devices, you have SceneMaestro, and you have a domain proxy instance that all kind of links together to be able to form this end-to-end CBRS service. Actually, within the last month, Cambium actually split out our domain proxy and added a second region within North America, such that we now provide a couple different things. We provide actual redundancy for our domain proxy function. So if we have a single cloud failure in one way, shape, or form, we're now not all leveraged onto just one instance. We have the ability to fail over. The second is that it also provides for load balancing and time best route. I guess I can kind of talk to it. So depending on where you are in the country, there's some measurements made between the devices when you're first coming up on the line to be able to determine which domain proxy instance. We have a West Coast instance and a East Coast instance within the AWS cloud. And depending on which one, that'll be your home, which one you're closer to, that'll be your home domain proxy. But if there's a failure in any way, shape, or form, whether it's with AWS or something within ours, you'll be able to revert over to the East Coast with really no interaction from you required. However, there are some things that make that happen better and more fluently as you take the newer Cambium software releases for both our radio device as well as for SceneMaestro. So my point isn't necessarily to drill in what those things are. My point is CBRS with all these different things that are kind of linked together, SceneMaestro, domain proxy, SAS admins, really kind of needs to change a little bit of mindset with how WISPs provide their services under CBRS. More often than not, historically, we've found, and I feel like I might be talking a little bit too much here, but I'll try to wind it up. More often, the history is you roll out a canopy type network, whatever the latest software is, it has the features that you need. There's really not that much reason to upgrade it a year down the road, 2 years down the road, unless there's something that you really need. And that seems to have been the historical behavior that we see for good reason for many people. With CBRS, at least your CBRS 3 gig network portion of your network, we really urge you to stay up to date with latest and greatest software rollouts because there are so much interdependency between what we're putting in our radios, what gets married up with Scene Maestro, and what gets married up with the SAS admins, which there are 3 of them that we have to deal with, and they have their own roadmaps as well. That being as much in sync with the latest softwares is going to keep you out of the troubles of what you were kind of, some of you were kind of iterating in the questions there about stability, things that help me keep my network up more. If I get hit by a DPA, do I have a chance of going to another channel? All these things are going to be critical that you keep up to date. I'll probably wrap it up there. I don't know if Lucia, if you want to, or if you have any additional thoughts on that. If not, we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, for sure, on our end, we are making a lot of improvements, so it definitely makes sense to keep updated, with the software and make sure you get all the new features. I also want to mention we do see improvements from all the SaaS vendors as well. So there were some hiccups, some stability issues early on, scalability or some issues on the sensor networks. We see all the SaaS vendors are really improving on that. So the whole ecosystem is going to behave better, is going to be better customer experience moving forward, thanks also to their effort.
Thanks for that. I agree with all those things that have been said. I think there's a couple of questions about beyond the US, what happens? What is our thoughts around that? And I think that's a very good question. I won't take too much time, but we do believe that once this becomes pretty stable, is viewed as successful globally, that there are applicable opportunities elsewhere in the world for CBRS-like dynamic spectrum sharing, basically, to be applied in many different frequencies in many parts of the world. Top of mind, there's about 5 or 6 different countries that are looking at this very closely. There's a lot of folks involved with the WIN Forum, which is the industry-led group that created the rules around this. What we hope is that most of the implementations around the world are less complex than what CBRS is. CBRS had to manage around the Department of Defense and all these exclusionary zones and naval radars signatures to detect things. The sharing that's envisioned with other markets should be simpler, and it should be much more like the frequency coordination that we see hopefully upcoming in the 6 gigahertz band in the US, which would be a little bit simpler, less onerous, and probably less costly to the end user, and perhaps to the SAS administrators or the AFC administrators going forward. So yeah, we do see applicable spectrum and countries that should adopt this kind of model going forward. Now, as whether the ITU guidelines are the same as FCC, I don't know. I don't know how it'll shake out. I anticipate it, again, to hopefully be simpler and less complex with less required protections for other users of the band, but we'll see. We'll see how things go. Moving on, I think there's a couple of specific questions. I'll address one before the other. First question is, are there any plans to extend the timeout or the suspension of transmission beyond 5-minute outage? That's not up to us. So number one is that 5-minute grace period, if you will, if a heartbeat is not acknowledged within 5 minutes, the radio stops transmitting. That is a rule of the FCC. That is written into the rules. It had nothing to do with Cambium. We didn't implement that rule. That is written into how CBRS is used. I do not see that changing. Now, granted, maybe the operation of CBRS goes without a hitch and there's no interference reported in the next couple of years, and the DoD says, we're good, we don't need to worry about that as much anymore. Maybe then the rules change, but that comes from the FCC. That is not a Cambium installed rule or Cambium enforced. It's enforced by us, but it's not our rule. It's the FCC's rule. So we are not looking to change that. So that answers that question, I think. Next one on the list here is there's a SM showing authorized, but the AP is out of sync with that. The AP thinks it's unauthorized still. The reboot does not fix it. So what can he do to help address this issue where the AP is saying unauthorized, but the SM is saying authorized? What, anyone want to jump on that? Evan?
With that one, I'd probably suggest opening a ticket with our team. I can pretty much get one of my guys to jump in pretty quickly and have a look at what's happening. There can be a few issues with that. It could be something as simple as incorrect ESN or MSN can cause it, or device type can sort of trip up this error. But if you have got a support ticket open for us for that issue, let me know and I'll get one of my engineers to have a look at it quickly for you.
Okay, thanks. There's a question about supply and availability of equipment. This has been a little bit of an issue lately because, frankly, we have unprecedented demand for this equipment right now. Since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, basically, demand for our stuff has increased quite a bit. And with the combination of not only the pandemic, but also these deadlines of the CBRS transition, and the more word of mouth and more success that we're having in this band, the demand is just through the roof. And so we are having a tough time keeping up with demand. We're doing the best we can. We've increased production levels across the board, but the pandemic is affecting the ability to do that as well with the factories where we build this stuff. It's tough, but we're doing the best we can, and we expect to be caught up before the end of the year. I know some projects have government funding tied to them and things, and we're working through those issues as we can and trying to address the critical needs as best we can. All I can say is if you have a need for equipment, see your partner, and if the partner doesn't have it, just make sure those orders get in place so that the partner can try to argue for your priorities as necessary. We got to get the best we can do to fulfill the demand. But yeah, it is truly unprecedented demand out there for this equipment. Let's see. A good question is there a Twitter handle or a Twitter user that we can put in place to kind of spit out there if there's an outage or a known issue with the SAS? That's not a bad thought. We are entertaining the idea of having a kind of a status page implemented, a status website that you can go to and say, you know, is it up, is it down, is there an issue, is it red, yellow, or green? So we're working on something like that. That right now it's just an idea, but we're working to develop that and get that in place sometime soon. Right now, the basic way that we communicate any kind of issue or outage is via email to the email that's subscribed, the technical email that's subscribed to when you sign up in CN Maestro. Mike Glish is on, and he kind of helps manage that email list. So as soon as something goes awry, and we are made aware of something, and we have several methods of maintaining awareness for any kind of hiccup or outage. We have devices that instantly, you know, will react when anything goes wrong. We call those our canary devices. We have also the NOCs from all of the SAS vendors that communicate directly to us as soon as they notice something wrong with their systems. So there's multiple inroads for those kinds of things, and then we submit and send out that email as soon as we know what's going on, or as soon as we find something that's not working as described. But a Twitter feed is not a bad idea, some kind of RSS feed, but we'll look into implementing that. I think that's a great idea, something like that associated with that web page, that status web page. That
I second that. That's a great idea. That's a really, really good idea.
Okay, we have another one talking about an AP. Let's see, let me read through this one. This is a Ethernet negotiation question, I think. So it says an AP is linking up at 100 megs versus a gig. So 100 meg full duplex, I assume, versus the gig full duplex. Why would that happen? You guys familiar with that? Has that? I know that happened on a long time ago.
Certainly CBRS agnostic.
Yeah, I don't think that has anything to do with CBRS specifically. Any comments on that?
That's Evan open a ticket 14.
Yeah, so normally the case with the Ethernet sort of port obviously throttling itself back to 100 meg Some of the main bottlenecks we see at that point is once it goes back to 100 meg, the cause of the actual service degrading also then normally includes a lot of discards, retries, CRC errors, things like that, which sort of impact the circuit in general. So it's not just it going back to 100 meg, which is causing a problem. It's the fact that there's most likely errors on the interface also, which are going to be causing you issues.
Symptom of the problem, rather than the problem.
So, especially on say like a Medusa, if you're pushing it pretty heavily, they also then it ramps up the retries for the radio interface. So you have more traffic coming in that can go out the Ethernet port, which then is a flow-on effect. So if there is a ticket open, I'll sort of dig it up and have a look over it, see what's happening. But yeah, the normal effect you'll see is a bottleneck happening in the interface. So even though the radio is still able to handle say 300-400 megaseconds of traffic, when it hits the interface at 100 meg, everything sort of gets queued up. Then we get more retries, which then puts like load on the radio, which then it's just a vicious circle you end up in that stage. So that's normally what we see when we have the interfaces throttle back, is normally the radio load can overwhelm the Ethernet port, which then causes the network traffic to drop with it at that point. So even though you're probably doing 100 meg, if there's actually the possibility of having more throughput, then it could just be something like that. But I can have a look if there is a case. I'll have a look and see what's happening.
Okay. There's a question about whether Cambium is going to do our own SaaS or not. The answer is no. We have no plans to do our own SaaS. We have 3 very strong partners who are experts in this field, and we don't believe that we would add any value into having our own SaaS. It's a somewhat expensive endeavor. Speaking for these companies that are doing it, they're doing it very well, and they're good at it. We don't. I don't see any way that Cambium would be profitable in getting into that space. So I mentioned 3 partners. That's Federated Wireless, that's Google, and that's CommScope. So you can choose when you sign up. It seems that maybe some of the folks here are maybe not users yet, which is awesome. When you sign up for CBRS service using Cambium equipment, you sign up via CN Maestro. And when you're doing that, you choose one of those 3 vendors, and you can choose any of the 3. They all have the same costs associated with them. So there's no difference in price. It's a matter of, in terms of choosing one, it's who do you trust, who do you like working with, what tools they might offer outside of the simple SaaS communication, which is all the same using our equipment. But those are the things that have the options of who do you choose. Let's see. Next question. One user is noticing Evan might be an admin user in the SaaS portal. Can you comment on that, Evan?
So when you say like as in the Google SaaS portal, you see me as an admin?
I'm not sure. Maybe that's what he's indicating.
So which one is that one? That's
about 5 up from the bottom.
5 up from the bottom. Yes, so the Cambium like that email address that I use in there is because I do a lot of the administration for the accounts under our parent node. So all the nodes, be it regardless of which SaaS vendor you're with, you'll probably most likely see myself or the support account listed against it. That's because we actually manage those. If you need, like say for instance, you accidentally delete your user, we can add you back in again. So things like that, we have access in there. We don't do any, we don't do anything like delete users or anything like that. We don't delete devices. We don't do anything harmful for the account. The reason we have the account like my user added there is for accountability. So if I did something, it is listed, it is logged, you know it was me that did it. It's one of those things, I don't really use agnostic accounts. I prefer to have my name on anything that I'm doing. Same thing goes if I ask for an invite to your Cambium ID. I don't want a generic account that you guys have. I'll have my own one, so anything that I do is logged, and the same thing goes for my team. So anything they do is all logged and documented, so there's full accountability on our behalf.
There's a question about eSIMs with our CPEs, and I think I should step back for a second and just kind of, it's clear that there's some folks that aren't that familiar with the 450 system that are on the call, which is awesome again. So our system is not LTE. This is a software-defined radio system that's completely separate from LTE. It's a very flat architecture. It has no concept of an EPC or a core. It's a fixed wireless. You're connecting a CPE module, a customer premise module, to a base station, and that base station can go straight to the internet. It's a very flat, simple architecture, and it's been in place for many years, so there's no concept of a SIM. Authorization and authentication is done usually through Radius, and so you can do all that outside of SIM modules. So there's no concept of a SIM in the 450 equipment.
No appetite to speak a little bit to Sea & Ranger on this, or?
Sure, we can do that. So we do have another product line that's entering the fray, or entering CBRS land, if you will. It was just authorized or just granted the FCC Part 96 grant about 3 weeks ago. That is known as Sea & Ranger, and that is an LTE-based product. So this first SM that we have, or first CPE module, is now authorized and will be shipping towards the end of the month here in November, and can be used with other LTE systems. Still requires Maestro to onboard and maintain that it utilizes the domain proxy, but it can be used with other vendor LTE equipment in the space. So we are coming out with our own eNode Bs as well, our own remote radio head that will be released in the late January, early February timeframe. And so that'll be a complete 3 gigahertz CBRS based system at the time. But right now the 450 line is the predominant one, and one most of the folks on the call are discussing here today. So yeah, thanks, Dave. We are going to have an LTE based product very shortly. There's a question about coax. And I guess the question says, can we discuss future plans and timelines for coax? We covered that a little bit this morning on the webinar. You can have a listen to that as well. I'm going to let Lucia speak to that again in a couple of seconds. And the actual question says, it doesn't prevent others from getting a grant, just suggests the best frequency. I'm not sure that that's how it works. I guess, Lucia, do you want to have a crack at that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, eventually coax is going to be supported by all the SaaS vendors, but currently there is only one, which is Google, who is starting with this, let's call it first phase of coax. In this phase, the devices can provide the coexistence parameters. Then the SaaS is going to take that into account. And when you perform a spectrum inquiry response, a spectrum inquiry request, the response is going to give you back a sorted list, meaning that it's going to recommend which channels are the best for your specific situation. So to answer your question, yes, it is true. It's not, nothing is enforced. That's why we refer to this as a kind of a phase one, because you do provide the parameters, they're taken into account in the math, but nothing gets enforced. So the SaaS doesn't really do the frequency planning for you. But when you do see the output of the spectrum inquiry, you can see which channels the SaaS is recommending for you. That being said, if any other channel is available, you can still ask for a grant on that channel. The ARP could be lower, but you still get a grant there, which is good. But at the same time, it means you could also be interfering with others. So this doesn't solve the interference issue, but it does provide recommendations. And if everybody follows the recommendation, I think there is a higher chance of limiting interference between operators. And we can go into more details if you want to know about coexistence parameters and what they mean. I can talk about this for a long time, but yeah, if you're interested in more details, just type in the chat or unmute yourself and we can talk more.
Okay, let's see. There's a couple questions on the Ranger product, and I answered one of them and posted the answer to everyone. And so you can have a read, but I'll summarize. So the question was, will that CN Ranger product be a Cat A indoor device? The answer is no. It's a Cat B outdoor long range intention kind of device. It looks a lot like the 450B, to be honest. It's integrated into the feed horn with a parabolic dish, very much like the 450B, but it's not a 450 product. It's strictly meant for interoperability with CN Ranger and LTE equipment. So it's a Cat 6 LTE device, outdoor category B CBRS. I hope that covers that. But again, it is available for pre-order if you'd like to check it out. The MSRP on that guy is $319, which is, in my mind, very cost-effective when compared to other high-gain devices of that range in the Category 6 type of range. So it's a very competitive product, considering what else is available in LTE in that space. Any updates on CBRS being applied to 5 gigahertz? So I don't think that they're going to try to do that. Now, with 6 gigahertz, the next band that they're talking about releasing, there is the concept of automatic frequency coordination, or AFC. That is coming. We know that already. We don't know exactly what that looks like. Again, the anticipation, though, is that it's less complex than CBRS, and the hope is that it's kind of a ping the database once a day to determine if there's any incumbents using any frequencies in your area. If not, then proceed as planned and move on with life. That's the hope. What remains to be seen is how exactly that'll be implemented. I don't anticipate that being available until the end of next year. That's what we're hearing from everyone so far. But I don't anticipate them applying CBRS-like things to 5 gigahertz. That will remain unlicensed and hopefully for a long time to come. I don't think they're going to change the rules on us on that. There's a reference to mid-range 3 gigahertz SM a long time ago. Yes, there was. We are no longer pursuing a mid-range or a mid-gain 450B in 3 gigahertz. We are looking at a possibility of doing some kind of device that's similar to the retro product. So we do a 450B retro product in the 5 gigahertz space, which looks a lot like the old form factor, kind of the candy bar form factor. We're looking at the potential of doing that in 3 gigahertz, though that is not yet committed, and I don't have a release date planned for that. I would like to do something in there because I know this high gain dish is fantastic and great for achieving long range and good coverage. But it's not always the right solution. So there is an opportunity for something with some smaller gain out there, I think, in CBRS. So that's the answer to that one. For CBRS related issues, is it proper to open a support ticket as I would for any other issue? That's a very good question, and the answer is absolutely yes. It's routed. When it's mentioned that it's CBRS in the ticket, it gets routed to the folks that know what happens with CBRS. And so that's absolutely the right path. Continue to do that, yes. And I think that's all the questions that I saw. Did I miss any, guys? Did you see any?
You skipped a couple that
Okay,
are
go back.
kind of related a little bit. I know one of them is probably one that Evan could probably give the top 2 reasons, and that's one talking about PMAC mismatch message.
There you go.
And then there's another one. I don't know if you want to address that one right now, but there's another one that's talking a little bit more high level about the usage of color codes with CBRS. And I know I have an opinion on that, but I might be a little extreme. So maybe I'll toss that one to Lucia to maybe kind of give some guidance on the usage of color codes with CBRS and what our feelings are with that. So
why don't we address that first one first, because it's a very specific question. So the question is, there's an error called PMAC not matched, reporting while importing data into CN Maestro. Evan, did you want to speak to that?
Okay, so this will be addressed shortly. This has to do with the management tool linking a SM or BHS to its current parent device within CN Maestro. So if you've got an SM that's connected to an existing AP and you say bringing it into CBRS for the first time on a 450M and you're migrating off an old 450, Maestro will know that it's actually linked against a different AP. The reason it sort of blocks you currently for this reason is because the other AP is most likely on a different frequency. So if you're going to be pre-authorizing the tool, we stop you from onboarding it on the wrong AP and getting a grant for the wrong frequency before deploying. We are speaking with engineering about putting an override function in there, so you'll get a warning saying, invalid PMAC mismatch or a parent MAC mismatch. Do you wish to import anyway? And you can actually force it in at that stage. I believe that is Lil Chi, do you know which release of Maestro that will be supported into?
I think the next one coming at the end of November should support that one.
Right.
So yep, so that will be supported. Like, that has been a question from a lot of customers, how to get around that. And it has been a lot of upgrade options. So people are migrating from an old Part 90 AP to a Part 96 on a newer, like a Medusa or 450i. And they want to move it across, but the problem is because it's claimed against the old AP, Maestro knows this and it'll stop you from doing it. But we are putting like I said, we're putting an override function in there to get around this issue. So if you do want to force it over to the correct AP to pre-authorize it, we're going to let you do that.
Okay.
Jump over to the color code commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
let me take that, and then Dave, you can add any of your thoughts.
No
So
worries.
definitely we need, if you want to use color codes, which you can, you need to go in it with your eyes wide open and understand what's happening here. So you can still use them, and we are not blocking it from the GUI or anything, but just high level what happens. Let's assume you have a subscriber connected to a primary AP, an AP on your primary color code. And in the area, the subscriber also sees another AP, which is on your secondary color code. So you're operating on the first, something happens on the first AP, goes away. Now the subscriber connects to the secondary AP. That triggers a re-registration in the SAS, which means that the original grant is automatically relinquished, and the second AP is asking for a new grant on behalf of DSM. Now, if you are in an area where you don't have to wait for CPAS, meaning you're not near an incumbent, the SAS doesn't need to do any calculations, then this is fine. The SAS is just going to process your grant request on the secondary AP, and it's going to authorize it. So in those areas, you can use the color codes the same way you do today. In areas where you have to wait for CPAS, it's more tricky, because now what happens, you connect to a secondary AP, you send the grant request. Now that grant request needs to go through CPAS. So now you're stuck until the next day. If the first AP is down because something broke, you're not going to recover it, then it's okay, meaning that at least you can attach to another AP, then you have an outage until overnight calculation until CPAS, but the next day at least you can have connectivity, so it may still be okay. But if the expectation is possibly maybe something happened in the AP, but you want to eventually recover within a few minutes, a few hours, you want to go back to the first AP. Now, another parameter is the SAS you're connected to. Because what happens? Let's assume the first AP was off the air for an hour. You're connected to a second AP, and now you're waiting for CPAS there. Now the first AP comes back, and you're saying, well, I might as well go to the first AP. I don't need to wait for CPAS to connect to the second AP. Not all the SASs behave the same way. If you're connected with Federated and the same day that you have relinquished the grant, you ask for the same grant again, then you're going to get the grant right away. Even if the first time you had to wait for CPAS, they keep the memory of what the grant was, and you get authorized right away. So in that scenario, it may be worth trying the second AP, but you always have the fallback. You can always go back to the first AP and get the grant. If you're connected to the other SASs, once you relinquish and you register because you're attaching to another AP, all the memory is wiped clean. So if you decide to go back to the first one, you're sending a new grant request, you have to go through CPAS again. So this is the scenario where you have to be careful that if you really want to use it, because the moment you've moved away, then you have relinquished your grant, you have to wait for CPAS no matter what. So I would say my recommendation is look where the deployments are. If you are deploying in an area where you don't have to wait for CPAS, then you can absolutely use color codes. If you're in an area where you have to wait for CPAS, think about which SAS you're connected to, if it's one type or the other, you may get stuck waiting for CPAS to get your old grant back. So something to consider here. I don't know, Dave, if you wanted to add anything.
No. I think you covered probably the more complicated scenario. Only thing I was going to add was maybe higher level. Different people use color codes for different reasons. Some people use, from what we've seen, some people use color codes for the absolute purpose of, I want to lock on this subscriber onto this AP and make sure it doesn't go anywhere. So I put a color code on it and make sure that's it, I'm done. Other people use it for the scenario of what Lucia kind of went through. I want to be able to have a fallback possibly if my coverage allows for where this SM is deployed, and there happens to be a second AP that could give it a little bit of coverage if the primary goes away, then I want to be able to leverage a secondary color code to fall back onto that other AP. But with CBRS, as Lucia just kind of went through, it's not as gates wide open, so to speak, or as easy a flow as pre-CBRS, where you have to get permission, you have to get a grant held for it. What happens to the prior grant? Which SAS am I on, and how does it behave? It adds some more complexity. So I guess bottom line is, when you're using it in the second scenario, the one that Lucia just kind of went through, you got to have your eyes wide open on all the caveats going with using secondary color codes on your network. So I guess that's my only additional add on there. One more, again, higher level thing. So what Evan kind of went through, talking about PMAC not match and how that's a current issue, but it's going to be not, it shouldn't be happening anymore with a new upgrade. Lucia was talking a bit about coax and what coax features are going to be available with Google and some other sessions. This is all about what we talked about a little bit earlier. You got to keep up with the software releases in order to take advantage of any of this stuff that we're talking about here, as far as helping you move through hiccups or be able to take advantage of coax. All of it has to match. So our updates, as well as the SAS admin updates, as well as perhaps sometimes even CN Maestro aspects of it as well. It really is a 3 or 4 different headed monster here, so to speak, or maybe shouldn't call it monster, but animal of some sort. All right, so that's probably my add-in.
Okay. There's a good question that came in at the end here. At what point, when installing a new customer, should the registration for the SM occur? Does that happen before or during the actual physical install? What do you guys recommend?
My recommendation is it's one of these learning curve things. I talk a lot of customers about. You do have a horizontal and vertical accuracy. You can actually enter in a pre-registration. So if you want to do it ahead of time, authorize the SM, you can actually set like a 10-meter horizontal accuracy from the lat long for the center of the roof line of the house. It's more problematic if you're near the coastal areas where CPAS is involved, because when you deploy in those areas, when the SM comes up initially, it may get suspended straight away. So if you're in a coastal area, I usually recommend try to pre-authorize where possible and use the horizontal accuracy to sort of, cover your bases, that you can be anywhere on that roof line. And same with the vertical accuracy. You can sort of say, well, I'm going to mount at 5 meters, put a 2 or 3 meter vertical accuracy in there, you can be, plus or minus from that value. It really does come down to your location and how you do it. I mostly recommend customers do it ahead of time. That way they don't get caught out when they send a truck out to do an install and you've got a customer expecting, to be home to, set the service up, and then it doesn't come up because it's suspended. That's why I sort of go down that path. We have a lot of customers around, that aren't in the coastal areas that'll do an install on the day and it gets granted straight away. So it comes down to knowing your sort of area, your region. Do you have problems with CPAS? Do you see suspensions because there's an incumbent, a fixed satellite station nearby, or a grandfather protection zone, which is still in force because it's got a extension on the permit? That's where those ones would come into play. But Personally, my one has always been recommending to do it ahead of time. That way you cover your base when you send the technicians on site, because you don't want to have to send them out there twice. The SM, it won't transmit to do even the link test or even the alignment until it's actually registered with the SAS. So all it will actually do at the moment will be sending the management traffic back and forth, and you won't be able to run like a link test or a alignment tool to actually get it to come online, because it's not actually transmitting. So that's sort of the reason I recommend doing it ahead of time.
Hey, Matt, so earlier you mentioned, at least looking through the list of attendees and such, that there might actually be a number, and even based on some of the questions, I guess, there might be some new to CBRS, new to Cambium attendees on the call. It might be worth, for those type of folks, it might be worth giving just a high level, or maybe Lucia can do this, not to divvy up the work group, but the whole differentiation that Cambium offers with what CN Maestro, what benefits CN Maestro gives with our CBRS admin tool to operators to be able to deal with pre-authorizations and things of that nature, at least initially, because that's a very valuable thing that we hear from a number of different users. We created for a couple different reasons. One, to help with transitions, but then one to help with exactly what was talked about here. Not so much the physical aspect, but at least what's my ability to get a grant in the area, what's the power I'm going to get, and things like that before rolling a truck. So
yeah, we can definitely speak to this, and
please.
it kind of ties in what Evan was saying in the recommendation, if you want to do things ahead of time or not.
Right.
So one of the main reasons why we developed this tool in CN Maestro was exactly for this scenario. Let's assume you are in an area where you have to wait for CPAS because you have incumbents near you. So the SAS needs to do some calculations before giving you a certain EIRP. Then what happens? You go out, you install the SM, and then you register. And then you have to wait until the next day to be authorized, and then DSM is actually working at that point. But if anything goes wrong, then you would need to send the technician out again, which obviously is something you want to avoid. To avoid this problem, then we came up with this tool in CN Maestro. It's fairly simple, I think, to use. You can either register one device, or you can even register an entire sector. You can list in a spreadsheet. We have a template. You can upload your AP and all the installation parameters and all the SMs and their installation parameters. And when you run the tool is going through the registration for all the devices, and it's also asking for a grant for the devices. Now, if the grant is suspended because you have to wait for CPAS for the next day, the tool is heartbeating, so it's doing that process that Matt was mentioning earlier of checking with the SAS every 5 minutes to see if the grant gets authorized. The tool keeps doing that, and this can be done even before the devices are actually installed. Physically, they may not even be there. Then you wait for CPAS. The next day, you see if the grants are authorized. At that point, you know for sure. There are no surprises. The SAS gave you the grant. You see the EIRP. You can see if it's something you want to accept, or do you need to tweak anything? Do you want to try another channel? You can do all this before you even send out the technician to do the installation. Once you're happy with the grant you have, the EIRP is good, it's authorized, then you can do the actual installation. And at that point, you would synchronize the device to CN Maestro. The CN Maestro is pushing the grant to the device takes over with a heartbeat. From the SAS point of view, it's like everything happened from the device. There is no knowledge of this tool. So this is great. Definitely something to consider is the accuracy that Evan was talking about. If you don't have the device installed out there, then you can play with this accuracy. You can say, I'm going to install it within so many meters horizontally and vertically. And as long as you're within that range, then the grant is still valid. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to ask for a new grant. If for some reason when you go out, you have to install farther than what in a different location that you are outside your accuracy, that would require a re-registration, which means waiting for CPAS again, if that's one of those areas, right? So in that scenario, again, use your judgment how wide of accuracy you want to put in there. The bigger value you put, the more flexibility you have because you have a wider area where you can install. But just so you understand that when you put that accuracy value, the SAS is going to do the math with the worst case location within that circle that you have indicated you are in. So if you are facing an incumbent in a certain direction, it's going to assume you are at the closest point in the circle you have indicated to that incumbent, and that could potentially lower your EIRP. Now, this is a little bit of corner cases, but just for you to understand how this parameter is used. If you are not in a CPaaS area and you can just go out and install and you register when you install, you know for sure where the location is, then we recommend to use very small accuracy values, 0 even, if you know for sure, because at that point the SaaS is going to do the math with that exact location. So going back to what Dave was saying, this is very useful because it allows you to kind of know for sure what you're going to get the next day virtually, just sitting in your office. You're going to put all the parameters in, you know, your location, and you know what kind of channel you can get, the bandwidth, the EIRP, before you do the actual installation. Another thing to mention is the idea of the tool is just to aid you to get the grant, but then you have to push the grant into the physical device. After 72 hours, if you haven't done that, the grant in the tool expires. You cannot keep the grant in the tool forever. So the idea is just to give you a little bit of time to figure out what you want to do. Then you install the physical device, and then you can push the grant and you're good to go.
Okay, thanks, Lucia and Dave. There was a question about, well, I think cnMaestro has a recommended software version in there. It puts a little recommended next to it, and it's the one that he's using currently says recommended is 16.2.2, but he noticed that on our website for the radio software, 16.2.3 is available. Which one should he be using? Now, my opinion here is that cnMaestro, the latest version of cnMaestro, should be recommending the latest version of the radio software, which in this case is 16.2.3. However, these may get out of step a little bit only because the timing of releases. But generally speaking, the latest released version is the one you want to be on, because we're always making improvements and going forward rather than backward in terms of feature set and stability increases and things like that. So the recommendation is definitely 16.2.3, and we'll look into why that version of cnMaestro is recommending 16.2.2. Again, I think it might be just a timing of release type of issue there. But yes, the current released version of CBRS cnMaestro is 2.4.1, if I'm correct, or is it 2.4.2 now?
2.4.1, I believe, is the current on-prem. I think we're upgrading to 2.4.2 in the cloud as we speak.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and then 16.2.3 is the latest released software version, but we are expecting an update to that in the next few weeks to correct a couple of things. So we're making, again, constant improvements and keep up to date with the latest software. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. We're approaching the end of the hour here. I thank everyone who joined. More than I thought joined. A few people joined a little bit late, which is awesome. And I think we will plan on having at least one more of these, depending on how the demand shakes out. But thank you for joining, and I hope we were able to answer some questions. We will post this recording in the forum, and hopefully this helps others. Thanks again, and thank you to all the panel members and experts for joining and helping me support me in this. Thanks again. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.